Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video, we're going to take a look at Mr. Jack Pocket. Mr. Jack Pocket is a two-player game in which one player plays as the killer, Mr. Jack, and the other player plays as the investigator, which has to catch him. Let's jump right in with a description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, then I'll be back for some closing remarks. This is the setup for Mr. Jack Pocket. The first thing you have to do is decide which player is going to be Mr. Jack and which player is going to be the investigator who's trying to catch Mr. Jack. Then you're just going to shuffle up these tiles randomly and lay them out suspect side up like so in a 3x3 square. Then you're going to put Holmes up here, Watson over here, and Toby down here. They always start in the same spot. The only thing you have to watch out for there is whichever way these tiles are oriented in these particular spaces right in front of them, you just turn them so the wall is always facing all three detectives. Everything else is totally random. You're just going to lay out your turn markers here, 1 to 8. They're just going to mark the progress during the game. And whoever's Mr. Jack is going to get an alibi card dealt to them secretly face down. They're going to look at it, and that's going to be who they are on this board. So only they know, the investigator doesn't know. The rest of the alibi cards are just going to form a stack like so, and you're ready to start the game. The game is played in turns composed of 2 stages, which are the manhunt and appeal for witnesses. The game continues until the investigator narrows it down to one suspect, who must be Mr. Jack, or Mr. Jack obtains 6 hourglasses and evades the investigator. The manhunt phase works slightly differently if it's an odd round, 1, 3, 5, 7, or an even round, 2, 4, 6, 8. When it's an odd round, you're just going to take all 4 of these action tokens and sort of throw them in the air, and they're all going to land different sides. It's like flipping 4 coins, and those are going to be the actions that are available for that turn. And the investigator always goes first in the odd rounds. He's going to take one of the actions. Mr. Jack is going to take the next 2, and whichever one left is going to go back to the investigator to take that 4th action. But then for the even rounds, you're just going to take these, you're going to flip them over to the opposite sides. Mr. Jack is going to take the first action, the investigator takes the next 2, and then Mr. Jack will take that final and 4th action. And we'll go over real quick what the different actions do. So you got Toby and Watson, and Holmes is also around, which whenever you take one of these actions, you move the matching detective 1 or 2 spaces clockwise around the board. Always has to be clockwise, so that would be 1 space, that would be 2 spaces. It's a mandatory movement if you choose to take that action, but 1 or 2 spaces is your choice. The next is this Joker space, and this allows you to move any one of them, not all 3 of them, any one of them 1 space clockwise. If Mr. Jack takes this action, he can also choose to move none of them. But the investigator cannot choose to move none of them. Next is the rotate, so you can pick any tile on the board and just rotate it however you'd like. There's 2 rotate actions, so if they are to come up during the same turn, the same tile cannot be rotated twice. That's the one caveat there. Next is the exchange 2 tiles, so you can exchange any 2 tiles on the board, but you have to keep their orientations the same. And the last action is the Alibi Action, and this works differently for Mr. Jack and for the investigator. If Mr. Jack takes it, he's going to draw the top card of the deck, and he's going to look at it, and it's going to have a certain number of hourglasses in the corner, might be 0, might be 2, might be 1. He's just going to keep that face down in front of him. That counts toward his hourglass total for winning the game. Remember, he needs to get to 6 at the end of a turn. But if the investigator takes the alibi action, he's just going to flip the top card, and that particular guy is going to flip over, making sure to keep the tile the same orientation. This guy is no longer the suspect, and he knows that. You would just toss it aside. So that action works a little bit differently for both of them, but regardless if it's an odd turn or an even turn, remember, odd turns you actually flip the coins, even turns you just take whatever the results of that flip were and flip them to the opposite side. So all 8 actions will always be available in sets of 2 turns. But the second stage of the turn always works the same way, and that's the appeal for witnesses. So Mr. Jack just reveals if he can be seen. So whoever he is, it's a secret. Of course, the investigator can't know, but he can be seen if any of the detectives in a line sees him. So we can see Watson here sees green, pink, and blue. Toby sees blue and gray. And Holmes can't see anybody because there's a wall. They can't see through these walls. They block their lines of sight. But if this card happens to be any of these, because these are seen, he would say, yes, I'm seen. If not, he would say, no, I'm not seen. So what happens at this time is if he is not seen, all of the guys that are seen will be flipped over. Again, making sure the orientations are the same because we know none of them are Mr. Jack. And Mr. Jack's going to take the current round marker, flip it to its hourglass side, and he's going to get one of those hourglasses he needs toward winning the game. However, if Mr. Jack is seen, we're going to flip all the guys over who are not seen, which in this case would be these guys over here, and the investigator is going to take this. The hourglass doesn't mean anything for the investigator, but he stopped Mr. Jack from getting it. Mr. Jack needs them to win the game. So the game continues like this until a single player has achieved his or her objective at the end of a turn. You can't achieve it during the turn. It's got to be at the end because the other guy could also potentially achieve his objective at the same time. The investigator wins if only one suspect is left face up, because that's got to be Mr. Jack. And Mr. Jack wins if he has 6 or more hourglasses, counting any hourglasses on alibi cards he drew during the game, but not on the one he starts with. This card does not count as an hourglass, even though it has one. That's just who he is, and he's always that same person for the entire game. If both players meet their objective at the same turn, though, the game can continue. It's just going to continue until a round ends in which the investigator can see Mr. Jack. If a round ends when the investigator can see Mr. Jack, the investigator has won. If Mr. Jack can avoid the investigator sight until the end of the 8th round, he wins in that case as well. It's also possible that no player meets their objective in the course of 8 turns, although it's pretty unlikely. But if that does happen, Mr. Jack is the winner. Let's get going with this example playthrough. Of course, Mr. Jack's identity would normally be a big secret, but it's face up here so everybody can see it. So it's an odd turn, so the investigator is going to take these and flip them, and these are the actions that are available for this turn. Because it's an odd turn, the investigator is going to pick first. So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to take the homes action, and he's going to move home 1 space clockwise. Be careful not to mix these up, and make sure this stays the direction it is, because remember, the even turns, you're just going to flip it over. So now Mr. Jack gets to pick 2 of the 3 remaining actions and essentially do them. One of them, he's going to take this and rotate it so Holmes can't see anything. And for the next one, he's going to rotate as well. He's going to rotate down here so that when the investigator takes his last action, which has to be to move Watson 1 or 2 spaces, Watson can't see anything. So now it goes on to the appeal for witnesses stage. The investigators can't actually see anybody, so clearly Mr. Jack remains unseen. So because he's unseen, we would flip over any of them that are seen, but none are seen. So it's a very good turn for Mr. Jack. And he gets the hourglass for the round because he's not seen. Remember, if Mr. Jack is seen, the investigator is going to take that. So now we move on to the even rounds. These are going to flip over, but Mr. Jack is going to take the first turn, and the investigator is going to take the next 2. So first thing he's going to do is he's going to get an alibi, and it's a secret. Unfortunately for him, it has no hourglasses on it, so that was a really bad draw, but it's just going to stay face down in front of him. The investigator has no idea that it has no hourglasses on it. So then he's going to take his next 2 turns. With the Joker, he can move anybody 1 space, so he's going to take Watson and move him 1 space. And then he's going to move Toby 2 spaces like so. But then Mr. Jack has the last laugh because he's going to get to switch 2 spaces on the board. It can be any 2, but he has to keep their orientations the same. So he's going to actually switch these 2 here. Now we check if Mr. Jack is seen. Only 1 person on the board can be seen. It's this yellow fellow here. And that is obviously not Mr. Jack because Mr. Jack is pink. So we know everybody seen is getting flipped over and keeping the orientation the same. And again, Mr. Jack collects another hourglass. He's doing very well. Now for an odd turn, we're going to flip all these again, and it's just going to start the cycle over again. We're going to jump ahead a little bit later in the game so you can see the final situation. Welcome back. It's getting near the end of the game. Mr. Jack has 4 showing hourglasses and 2 cards. Of course, the inspector doesn't know how many hourglasses those cards show, but he's not in great position. It's an even turn, so we know Mr. Jack's going to take the first action here. He decides he's just going to move Holmes 1 space. And now it's not looking too good for the investigator, but he's going to go ahead and rotate. So he's going to take this one, and he's going to rotate this space like so, and then he's going to take the Joker to move anybody 1 space, and I'll move Holmes over here. He's really hoping that Jack is one of these 2 here. And Watson now, for Jack's final move, is going to move 2 spaces, of course, as opposed to 1. So that's the situation. So Mr. Jack reveals that he is not seen. So these 2 guys are going to flip over because they are seen. And because Mr. Jack was not seen, he claims yet another hourglass. So far, the investigator has only gotten 1. Now, unfortunately for him, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he does have 1 on this card here. So he claims victory at the end of the 6th turn in this case because he has 6 hourglasses. Mr. Jack Pocket's a game I like a lot. It's very quick to play. It's very simple to understand. There's not a lot of rules or anything like that, and you can teach it to somebody really quick. Obviously, it's just for 2 players, but it really fits well for that type of thing. It takes just 15 minutes. It's the type of game you could play anywhere. You could play it in bed, and it's just a really nice added bonus that only takes up a little bit of shelf space. I really like the mechanics. I mean, it's not incredibly strategic or anything like that, and there's definitely luck if you do see Mr. Jack or trying to read the other person. Who might Mr. Jack be? Or if you are Mr. Jack, kind of sneaking around and hoping that he just doesn't happen to see you that turn and you get that last hourglass you need. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It plays real quick in 15 minutes. I think it's the type of game where you know right away if you'd like it or if you have somebody to play it with that would like it. But it's a real good type of introductory game, maybe for somebody that's not as much of a gamer, just because of the way you can kind of switch gears. Like if they've played a few times as the investigator, you can go ahead and switch to the other. So it just keeps it interesting, keeps it fun. It's a nice little fun game. It's easy to teach and learn. That's Mr. Jack Pocket.